So for those of you who don't know, this is Gerald Kauffman, doctor, who is at the University of Delaware. And he knows the Brandywine River, he knows fresh water. And Jared, just take it away.
All right, thanks. How long do we have, Don and Dustin?
Maximum is 2 hours, but we should be shorter than that.
Yeah, maximum, I would say 1 hour, but
yeah, 1 hour. That sounds about right. I think there's Zoom protocols out there about max 1 hour, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll dust off the. We'll try to go about 30 minutes or so, and then we can talk a lot about it.
Jerry, I need to interrupt this one thing. So everybody that's listening or on knows this is going to go out publicly, and everybody's going to be muted. And then at the end, I'll, if you have a question, just put it in the chat box and then I'll read it off. Just to keep everything organized.
Sounds good. All right, so I'm going to share the screen here. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Today's March 12th. Traditionally about March 15th is when the shad start running in the streams, because so we're getting close. This is good timing. Don, when the water temps get up to about upper 50, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and the stream flows get up to about 300 to 400 cubic feet per second in the Brandywine. And we have a good flow in the Brandywine now. It's about 700 because of the snow melt that's still going on up there in Downingtown. So the conditions are right for a good shad run this year. So what I like to do is talk about this initiative called Brandywine Shad 2020, and talk a little about what we're finding in this initiative. And I'm speaking on behalf of many others. I'm speaking on behalf of Hunter Lott, who lives down by the Brandywine, and Jim Shanahan. They're the co-founders of this group called Brandywine Shad 2020. And since we're in 2021, there's no, we're not renaming this initiative. 2020 was it's on the mug. It was a good round number. It was to set a goal in 3 years to start removing the dams and restoring fish passage. But Hunter mentioned to me it means more 2020 hindsight or foresight. So that's the initiative. So let's talk about that. Before I do, here I'm going to share a screen and just some interesting stuff. So here is a drone video. I'm going to try to bring that up from our consultant of the Brandywine. So can you see that there? Okay, yeah, so here's a drone video flying from Dam 5, which is up near Brandywine Falls, near Rockford Park, upstream, and you can see the DuPont Experimental Station on the right side there. And so we're using this footage to really look at, if you take the dam out, what is the river going to look like afterwards? Because you have to have a velocity between 1 and 8 feet per second for the American Shad to swim up. So they're one of the more powerful swimmers. They're actually more powerful swimmers than salmon. But salmon can jump more than a foot, whereas shad can only hop about 6 inches. But shad are much more powerful swimmers. So here you see coming up, we're going upstream now in this beautiful Brandywine. This was taken in autumn, early autumn. You can see the riffle sections, and this is the Lower Hagley Dam, which is we call Dam 6. Lower Hagley, because I didn't know this, but the experimental station was actually part of the Hagley gunpowder mills back in the day. So you can see it's at a 45-degree angle. We thought that maybe the dam would be passable to the shad, but you can see it's partially breached on the left there. So what's going to happen there is a partial breach. It's 200 feet wide, removing the middle 100 feet and leaving the historic remnants that were constructed in 1850 intact for historic reasons. So we get the best of both worlds. The pool will remain in some fashion, large enough and at the velocity less than 8 feet per second for the fish to move up. So this then you're moving upstream now. That's the rising Sen Lane Bridge there, and then you move up, and then you're up to Dam 7, which is at the beautiful Breck's Mill. So this is what we're talking about. So I wanted to start high and then we'll work down low, okay, to do this this talk here today. So what I want to bring in now then is I want to take this out, get that out here, and stop the share here. And I'm going to bring up the presentation.
You're muted, Gerald.
Okay. Okay, can you see this cover slide here? Yeah. All right, very good. Brandywine Shad 2020, we call it the nation's founding fish. Returns to America's most historic small watershed. Why the founding fish? Well, John McPhee is a Pulitzer Prize winning author at Princeton. Probably taught one of the more popular courses up there in English. He wrote a book about America's founding fish, about the return of the shad to the Delaware up above Trenton, up at Lambertville and New Hope. And wrote a really great treatise, which he does, his observational literature that he does. He actually lives what he writes about. And he wrote about that the shad swam up the Delaware in 1778 in March, and they made a left turn at the Schuylkill, and they went right up the river at the same time to save the troops at Valley Forge. And so there's a big debate about that. I think he kind of, John McPhee did, kind of talked about, well, it wasn't exactly true, it's folklore. But I've looked at some Hessian diaries that indicate, yeah, that did happen. They were concerned about, they actually tried to dam the Schuylkill to prevent the shad from spawning. That's the Hessians, by the way, who were in control of Philadelphia then. There's also folklore, just heard from Jim Cummings over in Potomac on the Upstream Alliance, Don. He does amazing work in the Potomac, which is amazing shad fishery. The folklore there is that the Potomac shad, they had these wagon trains that came in because George Washington was a shad fisherman, very lucrative shad fishery there at Mount Vernon. And so the folklore is that his own wagon saved Valley Forge. So it's an interesting talk about America's founding fish. So let's call it that. America's most historic small watershed, the Brandywine. Well, the National Geographic, after Barack Obama used the Theodore Roosevelt's 1906 Antiquities Act and passed an executive order that declared that the Woodlawn property would be Delaware's first national monument. The National Geographic wrote a beautiful story about it with the photographs and called the Brandywine America's most historic small watershed. And when you think about the history of the Brandywine, from the DuPonts, we'll talk about the Lenape, the Bancrofts who built the mills there at Dams 3 and 4 with their quarry, and they had their own trolley and train operation. It is indeed one of the most, America's most small watersheds. And we could call it that. And not to mention the Wyatts and the Piles and the Brandywine art. So it's a fascinating place. You know, I've lived in a lot of places, Golden, Colorado, and Madison, Fort Collins, Princeton. And I think this is one of the more beautiful landscapes around. So I'm over at the University of Delaware Water Resources Center. There are 54 National Institutes for Water Resources that are supported by the Water Resources Research Act of 1984. So there are 54 of us that's at the land-grant institutions that stretch from Maine to Micronesia, at the University of Guam, for instance. And we're charged with studying and researching the critical issues of the day in our states and our region, and train scientists, engineers, and social scientists for future careers in water. So that's what we do. So if you're out in the University of Hawaii, go to University of Hawaii in Maui there, and mention, hey, Delaware, they'll take you in. Okay. So so that's why we're involved in this initiative. So what's a diatomaceous fish? This is from Ed Hale. biologist at Sea Grant, Delaware Sea Grant over in the College of Earth Ocean Environment. These are fish like the Atlantic sturgeon, the dinosaurs of the deep, big 6 to 8 feet. They're endangered species list. They get hit by ship strikes in the Delaware, but juveniles have been found. Striped bass are anadromous. Of course, an amazing fishery, good eating too. They call them rockfish in the Chesapeake. And then the American shad that we're talking about, which the Atlantic States Fisheries Service just rated that the Delaware estuary was unsustainable for shad fishery, which is kind of a harsh word to us non-ichthyologists. That means will it ever come back? And then river herring, which are depleted, of course, but they are the root in the food web. They are the root source of the amazing food chain, and they're protected on the endangered list. So we're going to focus on American shad, but this project of restoring passage on the Brandywine will also provide passage for these other anadromous fish. So a bunch of us wrote a Delaware Naturalist Handbook with McKay Jenkins and Sue Barton, published by the UD Press, University of Virginia Press. Some of the stuff that I wrote, the chapter on watershed ecology, some of the stuff we're going to talk about here is in this book. And, I'd recommend if you're interested in Delaware's natural environment, this has everything in it. So McKay Jenkins' chapter alone on the Delaware's natural history is worth reading, because he went to school with he was taught by John McPhee. When McKay graduated from Columbia, he went up to Princeton to get his PhD, and now he's a journalism professor at the University of Delaware, and he's a great writer. So, we have our watersheds here. We're here in the Delaware Basin, the greater that stretches from Delaware all the way up to New York City. And we have a Delaware-based commission that protects this. 1961, John F. Kennedy signed this. So if the states don't match the political the watersheds don't match the political boundaries, which is one of our conundrums in water management, the next best thing is to have a basin commission that manages as a single entity. So JFK was convinced by Stuart Udall. He was the Secretary of Interior. He is Tom Udall's father. He's the good senator from New Mexico, to sign this compact. And so, half of all New York City's drinking water comes from the Catskills through a big aqueduct. So if you're at the Guggenheim, you're drinking water from the Delaware River, not the Hudson. And it's the best tasting water in America because it's highly filtered by the forests. So we're downstream, and we have a compact to protect us. When we look in the this network of watersheds and nested watersheds, we're down here in the Christina, Brandywine Christina. We're talking specifically about the Brandywine, the largest of the 4 streams in the Brandywine Christina. Red clay, white clay, Christina. Brandywine sort of like that pork chop shaped watershed there, 300 square miles, 90% in not even in Delaware, it's in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Who did that? That was William Penn, drew that arc, 1682, drew the arc boundary 12 miles from the steeple there in Newcastle to settle that dispute between the William Penn, the Quakers of William Penn and the Calverts, the Catholics in Baltimore, right? And so I like to remind my colleagues up in Pennsylvania, hey, remember when Pennsylvania used to be part of Delaware? And then I come down here and it's reverse, of course. But in any case, that demarcation divided our watershed, and it's a challenge really to manage it because we have different laws, different local ordinances up in Pennsylvania, and then when you cross into Delaware, it goes from a warm water stream to a cold water stream, and it's managed differently. So that's one of our challenges in water management is this hydropolitics, we'll call it. So it's fascinating. You even can throw in Mason-Dixon in there in this history that goes back, and then of course the legend of the wedge, which is another story. So in another case, we're focusing on this Brandywine watershed, which is very historic, but also it's the sole source of drinking water for Delaware's largest city, the city of Wilmington. And of course, we all know that the Wilmington is the headquarters of most of the Fortune 500 companies in the United States because of our forgiving banking laws here. So we like to say that the Brandywine is the economic engine of the city. And as the city of Wilmington goes, so does the state of Delaware. So the city of Wilmington has a gold mine in the Brandywine that flows right down the middle. So this Brandywine Shad 2020 initiative was formed when my office, we took a dam down in December of 2014. That was we called it dam number 1 on the White Clay Creek National Wild Scenic River. Why are we involved in? I was taught as an engineer at Rutgers to build dams, God help us, when I was going in 1980s. We were building dams. Now we're taking them down. It's much funner, much easier actually. So there's this nationwide and worldwide dam removal movement, thankfully enough. And so we got involved in the dam removal project because the White Clay Creek rides right through our campus. And so we were working with the National Park Service on the study of the White Clay Creek National Wild Scenic River after George H.W. Bush signed the legislation to study it under the National Wild Scenic River Act of 1968. So I've been involved in the Wild Scenic River since 1995. Bill Clinton signed that act in 2000, and that was an act that was supported by Joe Biden when he was U.S. Senator, Democrat, and a Republican congressman. His name was Joe. Let's see. I just need to think of it. I'll think of it in a minute. He's a Republican, but in any case, bipartisan. Isn't that nice? So we took a dam down, and it was the Hale Burns Dam, 1777 circa. It was the actual mill dam for the Hale Burns house. Those of you know it down there. That's the house where George Washington and the Marquis de Lafayette planned to defend Wilmington from the British who were coming across from the Chesapeake. So I thought I was out of the dam building business after 2014. We'll do one. Because we took the artifacts out, the timber cribs and the rock and the iron spikes that were forged back in 1777. And those artifacts are stored over at the Star campus. So not only do you have to when you do take a dam down, and it was a damaged dam, we took the middle 50 feet, and historic remnants are still there at the 8th hole of the Delaware Country Club. And if you ever want to go over there, I'll take you over there sometime. We go into I couldn't say enough about Delaware Park. They'll give us a bunch of golf carts, and we'll take a nice ride down and we'll see it. So I'd be glad to do that for the Sierra Club someday. Take a field recon and then take a spin on a golf club. Yeah, let's do it. I want to see what it looks like now. So in any case, we know how to do that. I thought it was out. Then Jim Shanahan lives down by Market Street in the Brandywine Fine area, and Hunter Lott lives up at the Brandywine Falls up near Rock. They gave me hey, I heard you took a dam down. We want to do the same in the Brandywine. So we got back into this. And so we're doing much for the educational value and the research value because we have students that are working on this, engineers, historians, geologists. So words got out about this initiative to not only just look at one dam, but to look at them as a watershed approach. Because a little bit over a year ago, there were 11 dams on the Brandywine stretching from Market Street at sea level. We call that the dam number 1, the city, and all the way up to dam 11 at Rockland. So that includes all the dams in Hagley. There's 10 now because the city took dam 1 out for about $1.5 million in the fall of 2019. There used to be 2 water lines that were rusting and dilapidated, and they spent $1 million to take those out, and then a few $100,000 to take out the concrete dam. Now the fish can swim freely up above the head of tide, all the way up above I-95 there to dam number 2. And that's pretty cool because, as I'll talk about, the juvenile shad are there, they're spawning. And it's amazing how quickly the shad will return and spawn. We thought it would take several years for that to happen. Through downtown Wilmington, we now call it the shad capital of Delaware. The New York Times got wind of it. John Hurdle, excellent journalist. He's written for the National Geographic, NPR, wrote an article in the New York Times about this. Word got out. I read it in the Chicago Tribune, the Seattle Intelligencer, and others. So I heard from a lot of people, hey, this is pretty cool. So word got out. The Brandywine is well studied. So the literature there is well founded. So we have in our library at the university many good books about this. This book here by Canby, one of the original Delawareans. When you see his name down, he actually was down, owned a mill down there in the colonial period. The illustration by Andrew Wyeth, right? And this book here, recommend reading, by Barksdale Maynard, Princeton professor, writes about the Brandywine and equates the Brandywine as the Thames of America, which is kind of cool. Shakespeare and literature and Oxford, and it is America's Thames, and so it's a very important river, small but important. This is the Brandywine. You can see the canyon. We call it the Piedmont. It is the Appalachian Piedmont, this physiographic province. So we go from the coastal plain, that light blue is sea level, and then these are the elevations above sea level. And this all the way up here in the Welsh Hills, 30 miles upstream from Wilmington, is 1,000 feet above sea level. And you can see why they call this the Piedmont physiographic, Piedmont Plateau physiographic province, because indeed there is a canyon. And you can see that here, and you can see the plateau where it flattens out. That's where the agriculture is, on the top of the plateau, but down the canyon, it's not arable. And so this canyon came into play for American history, and that's why the Battle of Brandywine was fought up at Chad's Ford, because that was the first ford basically above Wilmington, where the British, when they came up and they sailed up the Chesapeake and invaded Delaware in 1777 and marched through Newark, right by my office on Academy Street, and then they did the end run around Kennett Square. They met George Washington. He planned his defense here, where the river widened out. So it's pretty cool. Down where Hagley is, it's a canyon. And so that means the water comes down pretty quickly during flooding, and so we call it a flashy watershed. Got in the newspaper, the damn rule by the city, the excellent city doing it. This is my favorite guy. One of the workers on his coffee break catches the first shad, one of the first shad that we saw above the old dam number 1. And I love it because he caught that with his cigarette on his coffee break, right? Well, it was a good piece of science, actually. Jim and Hunter were in the Estuary magazine. They were in the Inquirer. So I like to think of a moniker, because this is environmentalism. That's Jim on the left and Hunter, and I give a lot of credit that I'm doing that. And they have the hatcheries here for the shad. There's one down in the Nanacoke. We like to bring one up here. This is the one in Philadelphia. And so shad hatcheries are circular, because the shad, if you make it square, rectangle, our fisheries biologists, the shad will get confused, and they'll swim into the corner and they'll never get out. So hatcheries must be circular. So for instance, we did a shad in schools project 10 years ago with shad, where we gave the schools, 4 schools in Delaware, 4 in Pennsylvania, 55-gallon drums. We have them in the basement of my office, and put a little aerator in there like you have in a fish tank. And we got the eggs from the Potomac from Jim Cummings over there, or up in the Lehigh. The eggs were fertilized. We put them in, and the school kids raised them, the little ichthyoplankton with the little eyes. And there was a hatchery. So we're gonna resurrect that program, which is pretty cool. And NPR, this is another story John did last spring. 15,000 hits on NPR. There's, in my business of water, I deal with wastewater, hazardous waste, not really fun stuff. This fish thing is one of the more popular fish projects I've ever done, because when you talk about fish, the anglers come out and they want to tell you, hey, I caught a 27-inch striper. Oh, where'd you catch it? I can't tell you that. So it's very mysterious, but very popular. And so what's going to be cool in a few weeks as it warms up, go down to Brandywine sometime. Go down there, take a walk around, do a loop between the zoo and the footbridge, like they used to do in the late 19th century with a parasol. That's what it felt like in the pandemic last spring. But check it out, because the anglers know, and they'll be out there. And it's fun to watch. So I want to talk about the Lenape. the Lenape, the original people of this land, recognition, our historic studies. When I look back at the study we did for the white clay for the National Park Service, and we did a 1A cultural review under Section 106 of the Cultural Resources Act that is required by this. Anything federal you must do. The chapter on the pre-European history of the white clay and its surrounding environments was only like a page long, right? So just cursory treatment of the woodland period and the Lenape that lived here. But now we're trying to pay attention that, the Lenape were here millennia, long before the 400 years of the Europeans, and we're trying to treat it like that. So we have some good literature. Here's the Lenape, the land of the Delaware is the Lenape Hockink, right? And that is the true name of the Delaware. And right here, not the Delaware. Delaware was Thomas West. He was the first English governor of Jamestown and Virginia. Was not a very good man. Slavery here in the New World, tried to eradicate the Irish, my people, 68% DNA over in, so he wasn't a good guy. He was descended from the Normans when they came over in 1066. And so here we have this Delaware River, the state of Delaware, my university named after like a tyrant, okay? So we're doing a project here at the university with our GIS system with Andrew Holmesy, our director, where we're remapping the names of all the rivers and streams in Delaware with not just the anglicized name, but the original Lenape name. So fortunately, we have a few there, like Naaman's was King Naaman's, who met the Dutch. Nanticoke is literally in Nanticoke language, the people of the Tidewater. And we're going to have a nice map that shows the original name, and perhaps we can get the Bureau of Geographic Names run by the USGS to start renaming them. So like the Christina was called the Minkwaskill by the Swedes. They thought the Lenape were the Minkwa Indians, right, further north. So it's very cool, and it's very good to keep this in mind because, and I'll show you at the end of this, we have a nice article from the Journal of Pennsylvania Archaeology that actually traces the American Shad, and again, American. Who was American? Margot Vespucci, right? Not very good to the original people here. That the shad and anadromous fish are very powerful parts of the original people of the New World here, and basically because of their spawning. So the way that their calendar, the Lenape's calendar, we have a Julian calendar because of the Romans, but their calendar is based on natural systems like spawning. So they knew it was spring when the shad were spawning. It's a fascinating read. I'll be prepared. And there's some data that says at least a millennium, we could say that they were spawning because they were to piece that together with artifacts from the late woodland period there. So the Lenape evolved to be woodland Indians, except for those Bay Indians down by Leipzig, the turtle totem. So then the Swedes got here 1638. We know the history, the Kalmar nickel. There's an old Swedish church there in the rocks. It's the reason why the oldest European settlement in the Delaware Valley, older than upstream there. And what's interesting, the folklore told to me by the Lenape that we know here, that when the Swedes came and met the Lenape know what they were talking. They could understand them because there's some similarities in the Lenape dialect with Scandinavian languages. And it's thought that, how did they know? Well, the Vikings were here a millennia ago. And so there's a lot of scientific data being done on that type of connection there, which is very fascinating. The origins that we love in this business, the origins of the names. The Brandywine, we think, is the Dutch for a brandy wine, a sweet wine that looked just like the river, like the river. And under this map in 1687 AD, it flowed into the Christian Creek and the Delaware River, 2 L's, right? The Christian Creek was Christian Creek. That was Queen Christiana, teenage queen. We had in the 1930s this big controversy in Delaware. Is it Christina or is it Christiana? Right? We have the Christina School District, the Christiana Mall, the Village of Christiana, and there's a state law, it's still in the books, that outlaws you saying that it's against the law to say Christiana. I checked, it's still in the books. So it's a very fast, these origins of names are very important. And you can see a growing Brandywine there in the late 17th century. This is interesting. Dennis Coker, the chief of the Turtle Totem down in Leipzig, you maybe know him. He told me about a village just upstream from the covered bridge there in the Brandywine, right at the Ark, where the Brandywine flows into Delaware, goes into Pennsylvania, comes back where the Wyatts live, called Quinamensing. And, it's true. There is an Indian village there because of the presence along the Brandywine. And in the folklore of the Lenape, it's called the River of the Longfish. And so what does that mean? What longfish? It was probably the Atlantic sturgeon and the short-nosed sturgeon were spawning there at one time, which is fascinating to think about as well. And maybe they will one day if this Brandywine Shad 2020 continues. So you can see the evolution of the boundaries, the three lower counties, that north-south boundary that Mason-Dixon surveyed there, and then met they were supposed to meet the Ark, but they missed it by a mile or two. And then they went to classic east-west. You can see here, indeed, the three lower counties in 1749 of Pennsylvania, because William Penn wanted a coast. Didn't quite have an ocean coast, right? So Delaware was a very strategic place. It was then, it still is now. We're the center of politics in the free world. Conestoga wagons originated here at Conestoga High School up in the Great Valley. Went west. The origins were here in the Brandywine. Of course, the pile, you have Brandywine art, the largest battle of the Revolution. The Americans lost, but George Washington was able to save the army to go on eventually win the war down in Norfolk at Yorktown. And the most important battle of Brandywine of the American Revolution, one of the most important, happened right here in the Brandywine. Here's a Hessian map that shows the importance of the Brandywine in terms of American history. So the Howe brothers, the admiral and the general, William Howe, landed here at Elk Point, sailed up to Elkton. They called it Head of Elk. They eventually marched into Delaware. That's why we call it the British invasion of Delaware. That was the first British invasion. The Beatles was the second. And then they marched up. That's true. Remember that? Late 60s. The White Album, we used to play it. I wasn't old enough, but my teenage neighbors, they played the White Album backwards, right? Anyway, I'm dating myself. Marched up through Hockessin. They stayed at the British stayed at the Hockessin Meeting House. If you go into the graveyard there, you'll see American and British and Hessian soldiers in the graveyard. And then they went up to Kennett Square, and then they had the Battle of Brandywine there. So for a brief period of a few weeks, the Brandywine was the epicenter of world history. And here's the root of it, of the British. To come through, went through right by my office, made a right turn on Main Street, crossed the white clay near the reservoir. There was no bridge there. It's called Simonton's Mill. How do we know the British were there? Because the mill keeper said when they came back that night, the British pulled a prank and turned the mill wheels on. And so it's just fascinating. Wrote a little book about it. It's called The British Invasion of Delaware. Happy to provide anybody a copy of it to read. And then went up there. So it's fascinating. In other words, the rivers and streams and the waterways had a lot to do with the way these battles were fought, and in turn, the way history. So it's often thought that George Washington wanted to meet the British at the Christina River at Couch's Bridge because of the Couches living there. Ned Couch's family has lived there for 250 years. As a matter of fact, Cornwallis bivouacked there at the Couch house, and Mr. Couch told us a story when we gave him an award, Defender of the Christina, at a conference I sponsored. He told the story about Cornwallis, trashed his place. So if you go back there, it's still there. There's a big photograph of Cornwallis surrendering at Yorktown, right above the fireplace. That's called shade. So that's beautiful. But we love the British, of course, and you know, things are still happening. Oprah said so, and there's an evolution of it. But we're Americans here. Two people divided by a common language, I think I heard, right? So here's the photographs of the Hessians at Kennet, just a rendering, and then DuPont's, of course. DuPont settled here. Why? Because the fall of the Brandywine is higher than Niagara Falls. The drop. Here's a rendering of the profile. We call it the Thalweg. The Thalweg is the lowest, deepest part of a river. Wherever the river is deepest, that's called a Thalweg. It's also, you get many points in Scrabble in a term like Thalweg. You can use all 7 letters, I think, right? Anyway, it falls deeper than Niagara Falls, the drop. It's over 150 feet. That's why the DuPonts put their gunpowder mills there. And of course, they made the gunpowder, sold to both sides during the Civil War, First World War, became a Fortune 500 chemical company, invented a lot of good materials for humankind, dealing with the legacy of that with terms of chemicals, et cetera. But the first industrial revolution in the United States were from hydropower. And Brandywine was at the center of that 19th century industrial revolution due to mill power by the potential energy created by the falling water there. And so here are the old excellent maps that the city's historians dug up for the historic investigation for dam number 1, 1816. This is down by Market Street. You can see the image of the scallops, or the shallops, and the sailing ships that would sail up at sea level. Right here, the Market Street, and then the mill dams. And you know, the falling water was so good, the potential energy, that they didn't put a raceway on one side, they put them on both sides. So they were getting double the mill power, and they could refine the wheat and you know, the fabrics and the corn, and then they would just load it right onto the ships right there, and then of course sail through the Colonial Highway system. And that's why Wilmington was really strategic, because it's one of the few places where you have the fall right next to sea level. So think about it. You might have that a little bit on the Schuylkill, but not so much. But there are very few places, at least in the Delaware, Hudson, and Chesapeake, where you have this situation. And here's moving upstream here, rendering from 1847. Here, this evolving Brandywine Village, city of Wilmington, very important place in the day, even more important now, as where democracy was reinvigorated. Right, so these maps are just fascinating to see the growth. There's Tatnall, Joseph Tatnall Mill. The first mill dam was built by a Swedish surgeon in the 1680s, down by dam number 1. So the remnants are still there. Tatnall School. So in this study of the Brandywine, you see all the famous names that you might recognize driving around here. Why? They're all down by the Brandywine as mill owners. This is one of the most important parts of the Brandywine and the Christina is Harriet Tubman, Moses of the New World. Underground Railroad started the Eastern Shore of Maryland down in Virginia. They're building a great new museum in Cape May. I got a chance to take a look at it over the summer. Actually, the slaves, she actually took the slaves across the Delaware. And of course, New Jersey was freed the slaves in the early 19th century, way before the Civil War. And I'm from New Jersey, Pennsauken, and Delaware was still a slave state. So that bay, that river, that Delaware River, was the separation between being free and not. And in Delaware, the Christina River is the separation, because south of Christina, Delaware was a slave state, but north of the Christina, mainly because of the Quakers and their tolerance, because of where they came from, when Oliver Cromwell tried to squash them out during that interregnum, when we didn't have a monarchy over there. Remember that study? Watch Elizabeth I. They were very tolerant, the Quakers, and so once Harriet Tubman took the slaves across the Christina and Wilmington, they were free. They were free, and that's very important. The line between north and south in Delaware is not the C&D Canal. and it's not even the Mason-Dixon line. It's the Christina River. And Thomas Westlager wrote an important book about that, the Christina, the Delaware's Forgotten River. And that's cool too. So here it is. There's the Christina. It looks like a real seaport, doesn't it, during the Civil War. Lithograph. There's the Brandywine here. That's the rocks where the Swedes settled. The church is still there. And you can see this isthmus. Isthmus. This is like Worcestershire. I can't say isthmus. But it's a cool water term because it's a narrow strip of land separated on both sides by water. So there's a cool isthmus up in Wisconsin, where my in-laws are from, in Madison. And there's one over that separates Asia from Europe over in the Bosphorus, right? In Turkey and Istanbul. So a very important place here. You can see why Wilmington was settled here on this peninsula between the two, this thriving seaport of the Christina and the Brandywine itself. So Christina is actually the dominant river in many ways, but it's become Delaware's forgotten river, and the emphasis has been on the Christina. Although the renaissance of the Christina that the mayor of Wilmington, Mayor Pasicki, worked on for 20 years and has shown real strength, the Christina has seen its revitalization. As a matter of fact, the President and Vice President of the United States had their announcement speeches there when the newspapers and the Associated Press finally recognized the election, I think for the third time. Thriving Wilmington in 1874, this is Market Street, the covered bridge there, and you can see the dams then. And what's interesting on the other side there, that's like where Wilmington Friends is, the high school in Alpocas Woods. There's no forest. The forests were denuded, maybe 5% based on the literature, because wood was the primary fuel source for steam and power until coal was hauled down the Delaware from the anthracite mines up in Lehigh River Valley. And so forests are the best land use, land cover we can have for watersheds to purify and filter along with wetlands. So there are more forests here in the Brandywine. We're up near 35% now in this same area. So that's good for the watershed. The more forests, the better. The thriving shipyard here at Christina River. This is about where the Blue Rock Stadium is. It's about where Joe Biden gave the speech. And you can see it was a real industrial place, right? Because of the Christina River here. And later in the First World War, most of the destroyers for the American fleet were built in Wilmington. It became part of the Arsenal America. The greater Delaware River complex was known as the Arsenal of America. Frederick Law Olmsted's even involved. His firm designed the Brandywine Park in the late 19th centuries to protect the water supply. So if you go to Central Park and study like I have, it was built as an oasis for the masses when before the child labor laws, before the Civil War, kids were working on Saturdays, working 75-hour weeks. And so the Central Park was built as a refuge. And what's cool about it is, and along with being the set for great films, Marathon Man, I can't go to the reservoir. And whenever I go to the dentist, I think about Dustin Hoffman. But the thing about Central Park is the separation of motorized traffic and pedestrian traffic and the great landscape architecture that was incorporated way back when to make it a special place. So you can see that in Prospect Park up in Brooklyn, and you can see that at many of the famous parks like Brookside Park in Milwaukee. And we have one here. We have like a Central Park Junior, and you can see it in the landscape for the curvilinear paths and streets and all the lawn furniture, things like that. Take a walk there. If you can't get to Central Park, go to the Brandywine Park. In a lot of ways, it's just as good. And that was built there to protect the water supply. So there's 1929, right around when the Great Depression hit. There in October 1929, you can see an upstream view of this tidewater right up Market Street. The fall line, that's dam number 1. That's out now. So you can see this, and this is the Market Street filter plant, where one of 2 filter plants where the city treats its drinking water. And it's still there today. And if you go there, it's clean. You can eat off the floor. It's like a hospital ward, the way the city keeps it clean. And it should be because of hygiene. And they installed a new microfiltration plant there 2 years ago for about $5 million. And that makes the water there very, very clean there, much, much cleaner than it used to be. And it's filtered to the highest degree. Hoops, very important part. Hoops is not in the Brandywine, it's in the Red Clay Watershed. There is an old town there. That's Delaware's Hoover Dam. That was the Irv Dam building, concrete dam, storing the water. And this is an amazing picture during the Great Depression. This is before FDR started the New Deal, of course. But, you know, men, workers taking pride in their work, building a tunnel underneath the Christina River that still stands today. And so I think that's the heart of what's going on with the new administration and trying to get the civilian, the CCC back together to put people back to work, young people, and restoring our environment at the same time, providing good paying jobs for your livelihood and, you know, also pride in working. And so what happened with FDR then can work out now. And I'm a big fan of that. Things like the AmeriCorps. I just saw that the Senator Coons and the president just approved $1 billion for the AmeriCorps. And so any young person out there, you want to get a good job after college, join the AmeriCorps. They'll give you a free place to live. They'll give you forgive your student expenses, a stipend, and you'll meet people and you'll be working in national parks and national forests. So check it out. Hoops filling, not many forests. Here's the Rockland. Okay, so now we get into the dams. This is the Bancroft Mills, 1937. Now this is really probably, they said the second part of the Great Depression was the worst. The nadir of the Depression, 1937. But you had this thriving industrial complex by the Bancrofts who made cotton. And so they built a dam here downstream, and they built dam number 4. This is called it still stands. And you can see the quarry over here, which is the climbing wall. And you can see the little footbridge over here that still stands. And this is Rockford Park over here. So what they built was this big, since the late 19th century, the cotton mills that lined it, and it was run by Water Power. And on the other side, they had 2 quarries. They had their own railroad, which is fascinating to think about. And they had these cable cars that would take the coal and other things back and forth across. Really a fascinating place. Any case, there's now there's a land swap between the state and the landowner there. They're building 4 new big apartment buildings down there. And so Dam 3, which is down here, is passable. I'll show you that. It's been breached by Mother Nature. Dam 4 has a big hole in it, and I'll get into the intricacies of that as well. 1940, Brandywine Creek. How do we know there's climate change? Well, they used to skate in the Brandywine, a fast-flowing creek like that. And, I grew up in Pennsauken during the late 70s, played hockey, played in high school and college. We used to skate on the Delaware River. You can't do that. Then maybe this year it iced over a little, but, that to me is my barometer of it. And the Brandywine Valley Association, America's oldest small watershed association, established right after the Second World War by the landowners there to protect and restore the Brandywine Valley upstream. And it works very well. They're celebrating their 75th anniversary and a fascinating organization there. The Brandywine Conservancy conserves all the land. Up there from Chad's Ford, they actually conserve the King Ranch. Check that out up in Embryville, the largest, and it still is the largest cattle ranch east of the Mississippi. And the DuPonts acquired that land for a reservoir back in the 1920s. It was never built, so instead it became this amazing, the Laurels, became the Laurels. Check that out, but you have to donate or join the Brandywine Conservancy, but check that out. That's a fascinating legacy there. So we have these amazing nonprofits that are protecting it. And then the Woodlawn Trustees, again, Barack Obama appointed the amendment, and Joe Biden, of course, the vice president here, then Congress did pass the legislation to appoint the Woodlawn property on the Brandywine as Delaware's first national park, because we didn't have one. We were the only one that didn't have it, although we had national wildlife refuges. So that was a big deal for us, and still is, because if you go up there during the pandemic, it's enormously popular. And, the National Park Service is working on a plan to bring more formal visitor centers and parking lots, etc. And there's the story in the National Geographic that called this America's most historic small watershed. And then these are the students and the Leaf Fellows from the University, from the Nature Conservancy, the high school, working with university students, and we use the National Monument as a research tank to do their work. Now let's get into the shad. American shad, Alosa sapidisma, about 2 to 2.5 feet long. They are anadromous, means they live most of their life in the ocean, and then they come back and spawn in fresh water every 4 to 5 years. They have a cousin called the Hickory Shad, Alosa mediocris. That's a smaller shad, but probably more abundant here. They go about 1 foot, 15 inches long. How'd you like to be a fish and have a Latin name, mediocris, right? Whereas the American shad is the Alosa sapidisma, which means a savory fish. And it is, if it's cooked properly. So you can go to Jansen's in Greenville right now and get some shad roe and some shad because they bring that out every year, and it's a cultural thing. How do we tell the difference between the Hickory shad and the American shad? The Hickory shad has a protruding jaw. And so I'm not an ichthyologist, but that's how I tell the difference between, as well as the size and then the markings here. But also they have a protruding jawline. We call it the Jay Leno of shad. And there's one. And so they call them a poor man's tarpon when you catch them on a fly rod. I wouldn't know. I don't catch fish. I'm not very good. I'm looking for some. I like to study them and eat them. But one of these days I'll catch a fish. Somebody will teach me. So what's going on here? The shad runs were coming back. This is in the Delaware up at Lambertville. They were coming back 90s with the cleaner water after the Clean Water Act. The oxygen block at Delaware at Philadelphia was 0 during the 60s when I was going to St. Cecilia's there in Pennsauken. And it started to level off, but still good shad runs up. And you can see up commercial landings, but then going down. So what's going on there? There's a good friend of mine, Des. He's a retired biometrician at the Dr. Des at the Delaware Department of Natural Resource Division of Fish and Wildlife. He's done studies. There's this inverse correlation between the shad and red and the stripers because the stripers feed on herring species. And so that's one of the things I think is becoming more cross-recognized. And that's a paradox. Whereas one species come back, the other suffers. So how to do that? Also, there's bycatch that's going on with commercial fisheries. And so that's been dealt with the Atlantic States Fisheries Marine Council about limiting bycatch of shad, making the holes larger, for instance. And then the other part of that is, this natural up and down of the shad. So eventually we think that the stripers will go down, the shad will go up. And it'll be this undulating kind of sine curve almost. So it's a fascinating thing to study, and there's always something more to study on this. So here are the dams. Again, dam number 1 was removed. The first dam, now the effort is to provide fish passage or remove the remaining 10, and the goal is to get the fish back to Pennsylvania. So they never swam in Pennsylvania. We know that for a fact, at least in the Brandywine, we know that for a fact, because the first dam was built in 1680 something, and there was no Pennsylvania then. When William Penn came in and named it Pennsylvania. Ironically enough, those of us that are Flyers fans and Eagles fans, they call it the city of brotherly love. I have season tickets at the Vet, 10 rows from the top in my family. It wasn't quite the city of brotherly love in Veterans Stadium, I can tell you that. Any case, the goal is to get the fish back to Pennsylvania. That's the goal. And there are 3 dams up there above Chad's Ford, and the Brandywine Red Clay Alliance took out the highest dam at Lenape. If you've ever been up there, Lenape Park there, they took one of the dams out just a few weeks ago for $50,000, and now there's 3 left. The Brandywine Conservancy is going to be looking at the dam near Baltimore Pike, Route 1, And they're also looking at the dam up by the second dam up at Britain's Bridge. And so the idea is to have those out. And for me, the curiosity is how far will the fish swim? You know, will they swim that far? The fisheries biologists say, hey, they swim all the way up the Delaware, up through the Poconos, through the Delaware Water Gap, all the way up past Port Jervis, into the east and west branch of Delaware, and they find shad right at the foot of the dams that the New York City owns at Cannonville, Peapacton, and Neversink. So they'll swim as far as the water's deep enough and the velocity is right. So the depth that they need is about, and there's no magic to this, but this is what's been proven, they need a minimum depth of twice their girth. So whatever their girth is from the top fin, so they need about 2 feet. And so that's our rule of thumb. Always have enough, they'll swim up to 2 feet of water. Now, we've seen the film out west in Alaska and Oregon where the fish will literally swim, the salmon will swim in a trickle, which is amazing. So that's interesting. So, you know, I took a kayak trip up at the Delaware Water Gap in 2011, was kayaking down to look at the Sojourn and saw these green vessels swimming in circles before us. And I thought it was some kids with a model boats, and they turned out to be shad, aquamarine shad, who had spent and spawned, and they were swimming in circles, just depositing. Eventually they're going to die and deposit their nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, back in. That's the way natural river systems would renutrify, was by the spawning, the decomposition of the nitrogen and phosphorus and the carbon in their flesh provide the nutrients for a natural river system to live, because a natural river system does need nutrients. Our problem right now is too many nutrients, which is providing eutrophication and algae. Anyway, here's that view of the dam number one. The city took it out. This is the work. It didn't look good. So this dam rule thing was, when you look at it, it looks like a mess. It looks like what's going on with the river. They're destroying it. I call it, you take one step back to go 2 steps forward. And it took a while because they had like 6 big floods. You can see the coffer dams they built. And it's just amazing how they can get the equipment down there. And they had to keep rebuilding the coffer dams because they got overflowed, and they got the dam out. So moving upstream, this is Dam 3, the Augustine Dam, which is, there's a historic sign that's about 1850. You can see this masonry dam. It's been breached, and that's passable now. So at the flows that we expect in the spring, which we call a median flow of 400 cubic feet per second. So yesterday it was 700. There's going to be 2 feet of water in there, and the velocity is going to be less than 8 feet per second. Mother Nature has accomplished that. So the fisheries surveys, there's been a lot done by the Division of Fish and Wildlife. They're there, primarily in the tidal Christina, off right near the Blue Rock Stadium. They're there. The water looks kind of murky while the UD crew team is practicing there. Our amazing UD crew team that beat Princeton and Yale and Harvard that year at the International College Championships, and they actually were banned from competing against them. But they train on the Christina River, and they're there. They're there. They're just waiting to swim up. So I went backwards, I think. Let me go. Okay, so now what's happening now is an Alcine survey. So what I'll do is, Don and Dustin, if you don't mind, there's commencing April 15th is going to be some scening there, and they're looking for volunteers. And this is the group. This is Ed Hale. That's Ian Park. Ed's in the middle. Ian Park is the fisheries biologist with the Division of Fish and Wildlife. That's Jim Shanahan there, and that's Deke. Deke brings the high school kids and the middle school kids in from Wilmington, from some of the basketball teams at Hicks, and the kids help man the nets, and which is, I think, is the beautiful thing, because the kids might not come down to the Brandywine, but they get to do this cool thing, and who knows, they may decide, hey, I might go to college or study this in high school, and it changes their whole lives, because they might go into science and that type of thing. So that's pretty cool. So Ed's got the Alcine survey that we're funding with a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant. And for the first time, we think, caught over about 70 juvenile shad. They're in the bucket in July, right after the 4th of July, for the first time, right underneath the I-95 bridge. So ironically, in the most urban part of the East Coast megalopolis, right underneath the road that Pulitzer Prize winning journalist wrote in the New York Times. Did you read the article about, hey, what's this Wilmington, this backwater city, all famous all of a sudden, who a lot of us took issuance with? I did. I wanted to write a letter, but he didn't. If he would have come to the Brandywine and saw the park and saw, Hagley, he would have saw a world-class city, I think. So in other words, for the first time, we think in 300 years, the fish are spawning there unimpeded. And that's Ed. And he's got some money over in the College of Earth Environment to recommence that. And this is the scening that was done in July. So you can see the kids are doing this. And that's a beach right underneath I-95. And the water's pure enough to go in there. You don't have to worry about the health of it. And this is how they're catching it. That's Muskie Mike, one of our friends at dam number 2. He's one of the stalwarts. He'll be out there. He catches a fish on demand. So you want a fish? Let me go catch one for the photo op. There he is again. So then the Kleinschmidt, we have a firm out of Lancaster, Strasburg, up there. Remember Witness, Harrison Ford, up there, filmed in Pennsylvania, Dutch country. Strasburg's the town where Harrison Ford went and met the Mennonites, and that clash of the cultures. Anyway, Kleinschmidt's a very good fish ecology firm that we brought on board, and they've done some economic studies on how much it would cost. So dam 2, we have 3 alternatives. Fishway would be a fish ladder. It's like an escalator. So there's a fish ladder there now. If you look upstream, there's a concrete ledge on the right. That was the old salmon-style fish ladder that was designed and built in the 1970s because they didn't have any better designs. They said, hey, let's grab a salmon style. The problem is the shad can't hop up and over. They can't jump like the shad can. So it was useless. Daniil ladder is more of an escalator. And we learned about the hydraulics of it. The other thing is if you put the entrance too far downstream from the dam, the fish won't find it. They swim right to the foot of the dam, and then they'll make the turn to go up to the current. And the current guides them like it always has. Now it costs about $500,000. Natural bypass channel, that's a canal around it, right side looking up, like they have one of those in Ann Arbor and Michigan. I was out there a couple summers ago where you can, the fish can go up and around. At the same time, you have this amazing kayak canoe livery right there where, where there were hundreds of people there on a summer's day in downtown Ann Arbor. And then a rock ramp is basically, the dam is 8 feet high, and you'd pile rock up at a 3% slope, right? 3% slope, and raise the Thalwegger elevation so that the fish could swim up and over. So basically, it looks like a natural stream, but you won't see the dam, but the dam will still exist. This dam's now coming out because that's the main water supply dam for the city of Wilmington. That diverts water into the raceway to go to the Market Street filter plant, and also creates the pool for the Wills pump station near the footbridge there, and that pumps the water up to Cool Springs Reservoir at the top near the Blue Ball Dam. So that's an important pool of water there. Dam 3, that's out. If we wanted to reshape it, it would cost $60,000. We don't want to have to go and get the permits. Dam 4, that's the crux dam. If you go there when the flow is less than 200 cubic feet per second, like I did the day before ECAS hit in August there, and we had the tornado 4 days later, there's a big cavity like 20 feet wide. I think I'll have a photograph. And that dam is failing, and I think it's a public risk. Dam 5's at Brandywine Falls. That's structurally intact, 200 feet wide. The same alternatives looking for Dam 2. We're looking for 5. And then 6, that dam is owned by DuPont. They're very eager to be a good environmental citizen because their employees live and work in Delaware and want to live in a community. And they've actually investing directly in the removal of this dam. So we have the money. So we do have the money now for most of this work except for Dam 2. And that's a thing. So there's good hydraulics. That's something I teach at the University of Water Resources Engineering. You can see how you can design it hydraulically with the velocity and the depths. So we have a hydraulic model called HECRAS, United States Army Corps of Engineers, where the students at the University of Delaware actually doing consultant level work that would normally cost, like $100 an hour. They actually did the hydraulic analysis as part of the class. So this here is that fishway bypass. It's a step pool, beautiful, that would bypass. Here's the rock ramp, right? Rock ramp type construction. So these are used mainly up in New England, so where they perfected this, and we're trying to bring it down to the Mid-Atlantic. So again, here's the Thalweg and the profile here that shows the dams, and we use that information to do the hydraulics. We have a design of a denial ladder on dam number 2. This was actually done by Kleinschmidt 10 years ago. So now it's been resurrected, and you can see it over here on the right side. The fish swim up. They go up the escalator here like a switchback and up and over. And we really hope to get that in there in 2021 to be ready for the next spawning period. So again, dam 3, that's been breached. Mother Nature did the job. Dam 4, here's the one that has the big hole in it. The big apartments are going in. The 4 big ones are being built right now to the left. We're going in under the historic review. We're trying to get in there when the flow goes below. So this was about 150 cubic feet per second. As an engineer, civil engineer, PE, that's unsafe. And we're trying to get the state to petition to condemn it. And then here's the dam at 5, or 6, which is the experimental dam. You can see that's been breached a little bit on the right side. And that has a county has a sewer line downstream. It actually has a secondary obstruction. And we're making good headway on that. We're out at the historians yesterday, and we think we can get that out as a partial breach by the end of this calendar year. So here's one of our other fishermen. We don't have a nickname for him yet. He catches fish as well. So we're doing historic studies. So this is not only a fish project, it's not only water quality, it's a history. It's also a history project. So we have historians at our Center for Historic Architecture Design right across the street from me on Academy Street and in the Biden School. They're in the Biden School as well. And they're looking at the historic sites. So this is for the Dam 3 here, the Augustine Dam is historic. Dam 4, the Hagley Dam is historic, although many of the historic sites are gone with the leveling of it where they're building the condominiums. And then Dam 6 is clearly historic. So we're studying that now because we have to get approval from the Secretary of Interior under Section 106 of the Cultural Resources Act, and that takes time. So we have a before and after rendering from our hydraulic model and what the flow and the depth and velocity will look like, and we have a good handle on that. And this is the profile of the dams going up from tidewater upstream to 80 feet above sea level. And then this is the rendering of Dam 3 here, and then this is Dam 4, right? And then this is Dam 5 and Dam 6. And if you imagine if you take them out, that then removes the obstruction. So we have to model that using hydraulics. So we're at the end here. What's next? What's interesting about the Brandywine in the 70s, after the 1968 National Wild Scenic River Act, National Park Service went out and looked at the entire United States and said, hey, what rivers are eligible for National Wild Scenic River eligibility? Would have free-flowing capacity, have some type of significant cultural, historic, ecological significance that sets them apart from any others. And they actually mapped the middle of the Brandywine. There's a blue line there from Shad's Ford down to Hagley. And so that means the Brandywine is eligible for National Wild Scenic River status, just like the White Clay was. So we're talking about some point this year re-engaging with the National Park Service to study whether the Brandywine would be eligible for National Wild Scenic River status, and that would give greater protection to this amazing river, along with being in sync with the national park, which lies along its banks as well. So with that, I think I went 40 minutes. Part of the University of Delaware, very proud of its origin, 1743. 3 signers of the Declaration of Independence. A 4th signer was actually educated by Francis Allison, the first provost there. 8th oldest institution of higher learning nation, older than Princeton, older than Penn, older than Columbia. Some say we should be in the Ivy League.
Okay.
I sometimes I agree, and sometimes I don't. I think we have to win the Colonial Athletic Conference first.
So Jerry, I have a few personal questions.
Yes.
How do you pay for this?
Mhm. Yeah, how do you pay? Right.
And where are we in the dam removal?
Okay. So so let's go on the status report. First thing is how to pay. So that's one of the more important critical paths. And so it's a collection, like any good watershed project, it's a collection of number of sources. So for the city, we'll just go up in order. Dam number 2 at the city dam, the city owns that. We're trying to get some funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to do some of the feasibility studies, but the actual removal will be funded by the city, or the fish pastures be funded by the city because they have a pot. Dam 4, the funding there, Hunter's got some philanthropic organizations that are interested in the environment that have kicked in funds. So they have a pot of money there. There's also a supplemental pot that might come from some damage money from damages along the Delaware, pollution damages that the Department of Natural Resources would allocate toward this. And then the upstream dams at Dam 6, that's DuPont. And then once we get into Hagley has shown an indication, although these dams won't be removed, these will be rock ramps, and 2 of them are already breached, or we may even be able to use the canal, the raceways themselves. They're going to help pay for that.
Okay.
So it's a combination, but it is a big deal these days. And there's also a question, maybe at this big infrastructure stimulus bill, there's actually a thinking that some of this may trickle down.
Is there anything we can do to help raise money?
Yeah, I think so. Once we get to Dam 2, actually, which is the Crux Dam. So we're embarking on that now, and we can reach out to the Sierra Club. They have the Sierra Club backing, will be tremendous when we go forward with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, because we're going to file for a grant in April under the Delaware River-Based Conservation Act.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Just unmute yourself if you do. Let me see. I don't know. We've had some issues.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Dale, can you hear me?
I can now, and I just
okay. So you can unmute yourself. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and I could be wrong about this, but it's important to get these dams taken out in order. It doesn't help to remove Dam 8 if we don't get Dam 4 out first. Is that relatively correct?
Yeah, it is. It is actually, Dale. That's a good question about the approach, the strategy, say. So classically, we work downstream to upstream. You would think intuitively as well. And the city dam is the Crux Dam. It's the dam that's not coming out. And so therefore, we need to really come up with this kind of ingenious alternative, which will remove as much shad production potential as possible. Last year, because of the presence of the NIFWIF funds, the Delaware River-Based Conservation Act, which we applied for, and then the pandemic hit, we thought, well, not sure what's going to happen with the pandemic. What are the jobs going to be? Who's going to be working? So we decided to take the approach, let's finish what Mother Nature started and look to finish the removal of dams 3, 4, and 5, 6, because they're already breached. And we got a little feedback from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that, well, what about Dam 2? Again, what you're saying. And so we've gone back to that this year. Let's focus our attentions on Dam 2 and move upstream systematically, because that makes sense. Now, what's happened because of the advocacy up in Pennsylvania, the Brandywine Red Clay Alliance got funds to remove the most upper stream dam because they had a willing property owner, Lenape, which has gotten flooded out a lot recently. You see the picnic tables piled up. So what I do then, I think, okay, well, maybe this is like the island hopping campaign that America fought, right? In the Pacific Theater, where you couldn't, during this World War, they basically fought their way across and went back and got the island, then went back and went in between. It's the same way, a little bit of a secret in transportation engineering. It works. with building highways and bridges. They built the interstate highway system this way. They said, well, we don't have the money to finish the interstate highway through Delaware, I-95. Let's build most of it where we can. And then you go back in and fill in the middle, because you can go back and say, hey, we have a road here, we have a road here. What are we going to do? Leave the remaining piece? And then so that the elected officials just can't say, no, we're not going to finish it. So we have a little bit of that here going on as well. Kind of a top-down, bottom-up approach that'll meet middle in. But we are concentrating all of our energies now on Dam 2.
Thank you.
Yeah. But we'll take a dam out. We'll take a dam where we can get it. And we can have a dam out on the weekend, environmentally safe. They're just, as long as I'm on the subject, the dam they took out up at the Brandywine Lenape, concerned about sediment building up behind. We studied the sediment, spent 50 grand doing that with the Department of Natural Resources, looking at the gradation of the sediments, as well as the quality of any hazardous materials, given that there's been industries up there for 150 years. And it's clean. The sediments are clean, and there's not much behind. Because what's happened is the slope of the Brandywine is such that all the sediment's been scoured out. And so when they took the dam up at the Lenape, which is flatter, there's a sediment gauge that Chad's Ford USGS has called turbidity. There is no bump in turbidity after they took the dam out several weeks ago. That's good news, because we are concerned about that, fixing one problem and creating another problem downstream.
Leslie has a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Leslie. Are you able to unmute yourself? Otherwise, I know that Leslie had an earlier question about why the Christina was the major river. That may have been answered.
I can answer it if you like.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, it looks like it was just a busy river.
Yeah, I see that. So we look at the map. There's two reasons hydrologically. The Christina River is the river that enters the Delaware. So in hydrology, you name the river after the river that enters the next downstream one. So technically, the Christina River enters the Delaware, so therefore it's the dominant. But the Christina itself, by length, is much shorter. It goes up to Newark, up to Kemblesville there, in the Maryland and Pennsylvania. It's much shorter than the Brandywine. So by a quirk of hydrology, this system is known by the USGS as the Christina River system. And by the width of its estuary there, the tidal part, it's the dominant one. Although the Brandywine is much longer and has a much larger drainage area. Christina River has 60-mile drainage area. The Brandywine has 330 miles. So it's a quirk. We don't see this too often. And we always like these types of little things that make the first state different. The other part is the ancient in our field. What's the difference between a river and a creek? And we're having this debate right now with anybody that wants to have it. Hey, the Brandywine's a creek. We say it's a river. I think the way to settle it is in our field. If you can swim across it, if you have to swim across it, it's a river. If you can wade across it, it's a creek. And so we use that. And so I made sure the time I tested it with some of my friends, I swam across it. And I put a Google poll out. And I made sure my daughters voted for river, the river one. But anyway, it's a good debate to have. In Delaware, we need all the rivers we can get.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much. Keep us informed. Even if one of these dams is being removed, I wouldn't mind just coming over and seeing what they're doing, because my wife and I hike around the Brandywine all the time, and we watched the removal of the dam by the city, and that was pretty amazing to watch as they fought the river.
Okay. If you don't mind, Don, Dustin, add you to the email list.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, we have an email list called Brandywine Shad 2020. And
Yeah.
anything that gets done, you'll be on that list.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you everyone that joined us.
Yeah, thanks. Keep up the good work, Sierra Club. My daughters are members. They go on the trips. They went to New Mexico to the amazing, and they were going to go to Grand Canyon last spring, but they couldn't go this year. So big fan of Sierra Club.
All right, great. Thanks again.
Okay.
Bye,
Have a
everyone.
great weekend. It's going to snow on Monday.
There you go.
Hope not. Bye-bye.